Welcome to the Divine Feminine Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Celeste Hartwell, and we are a feminine view of entrepreneurship for women, by women. Unofficially, we interview women who are making a shit ton of money and breaking all the rules. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get into it. Hello, happy Monday to everyone. This is Celeste Hartwell, your host of Divine Feminine Leaders podcast. And I wanted to jump in today with a really fun tarot card from this Divine Feminine Oracle deck from Megan Watterson. And today we have Ariadne, Mistress of the Labyrinth. My soul knows the way, and the only way out is through. And so I'm just going to flip really quickly. I think she's really beautiful. I've actually never seen this card, so I'm very excited to see what her little message is for us today. The only way out is through definitely resonates with me, because as a person who has really tried to ignore negative feelings and get away from things that didn't feel great in the past, that is not helpful, and it actually prolongs the pain. So it says that Ariadne represents the love and support available to us when we dare to be courageous. It says that she is a symbol of the hope, the divine assistance, and the step-by-step process we can take to move through a difficult time or confront an injustice in our life. She helps because Theseus, I'm not sure who he is, but because he's daring to end a pattern of madness, he's willing to do whatever needs to be done to stop the injustice. She gives him the tools to create his desired outcome. He is successful because of her, and she assists him because he acts with courage. Her message is that our courage is always in some way rewarded when we seek and to end an unnecessary pattern or routine that is no longer serving us, even though we initially created it in the effort to keep us safe. It can feel as insurmountable as passing a horned part man, part beast that lives in a dark space inside us, pure terror. But the soul always wants our freedom. The divine is what liberates us, not confines. And so it says that the soul voice meditation, you can do a meditation around this. And the question in that meditation is, what allows me to feel supported while doing the inner work? So I'd love to see, if you're watching us live, what your comments are around that. Again, the question is, what allows me to feel supported while doing the inner work? And again, the intention with Ariadne is, my soul knows the way, the only way out is through. I'm really excited to see how that is our theme today in this amazing episode. Today, I am so honored and excited to be introducing you to Heather Esposito. She is a holistic business coach and mindset coach who loves helping entrepreneurs connect their subconscious and conscious minds to heal and thrive so they can create more impact and income. An entrepreneur herself, she has a master's in counseling, is a certified holistic health and life coach, co-founded a gluten-free, allergen-friendly bakery, and was on Cupcake Wars, Unique Sweets, Foodography, and worked as a coach for Tony Robbins' company for 3.5 years. After being frustrated working as both a therapist and a coach, she found the missing link of energy healing and now runs her own holistic business coaching energy healing practice, combining each of these modalities. And I am so honored to be talking to Heather. Like, we've been connected for a while now. We connected through an incredible friend of mine who I regard very, very highly. And she's just been, every time I've talked to her, which to be fair, maybe has been once in person, but following her on Facebook too has been a lot of fun. And I love seeing her. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Heather. Welcome, Heather.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Celeste. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. I am so excited to get into it because when we were talking and when I was learning more about you, you talked about and we alluded to a little bit the 7 sacred money archetypes, what they are and how you can use them to create a great relationship with money. And
Mhm.
I'm just speaking for myself and everyone that I know. Having a great relationship with money is super, super important. So tell us a little bit about like what got you on this journey to talk about, our sacred archetypes around money and also like having a great relationship with it.
Yeah. So I think for most people, we teach what we need to learn. Right? And I did not grow up with any kind of training around money, or to have any kind of relationship with it except fear, right? That was just the natural thing. I didn't know what to do with it. I never had any help with it. So I feared it. And when I had sold my bakery, I had gotten a good chunk of change. And I went to a financial planner and was like, help me. And they were like, well, we can't help you with this much, only if you had this much. And since then, I've talked to people who are financial planners and they're like, yeah, it's kind of how the industry is. Blah, blah. But in my mind at that point, it was just like, see, I'm never going to be able to get help with this. And I needed to learn, like, I was like, I just need to know what to do with it, like how to do money. And I began to realize after I went to Tony Robbins' Wealth Mastery, spent thousands of dollars on that. And literally, Celeste, I cried the entire time.
Oh my God.
They're talking about all these things like of how to do money. And I'm like, well, I don't have any. So like, that's not helping me right now. And I realized that it was the not having any is because my relationship with money was so poor. I didn't feel like I deserved it. Like most women, feel. I didn't feel like I was smart enough to do anything with it. And so I just kept putting up all these barriers around money and just didn't welcome it. And the money that I did earn from my bakery, it just, I won't say it went out the door because it went into so much personal development for me. So really like it was an investment in myself. But it was still wasn't there the way that I wanted it to be there. Like it was, I went through it, and I invested in myself heavily, I will say. And so I had been looking at like really healing all of these inner wounds that I had around money and my fears around money. And I had came across back in maybe 2012, Kendall Summerhawk, who teaches, about money. And I just one night was like, I wonder what she teaches specifically about it. And so I just, went to the Google and, pulled up, and she had changed how she was teaching from when I had originally heard of her, and started teaching about the Sacred Money Archetypes. And as one who I understand, I've been certified in DISC assessment, which is like personal, like understanding people's personalities.
Right.
And understanding that helps to understand the container that we're in. And it doesn't, people are like, well, I don't want you to put boundaries around me. And like, it doesn't do that at all. It just helps us to know like how you function. Just like I know I have brown curly hair, how I treat my hair is very different than if I had like, blonde straight hair, right? I know how to deal with it, just in the same way in my personality. So understanding the archetypes, when I read them and started seeing, oh my gosh, I got understanding mine, patterns all across, not just with money, started appearing. I was like, oh, I see how this is how I do money is how I do other things in my world. And as I started teaching it became even so much more fun with clients, is they're like, wow, I noticed that this has nothing to do with money and it has everything to do with my relationship with myself. And taking back their own personal power, right?
Oh my God. I feel like that's such a mic drop moment for the people who are hearing this on the podcast and not seeing my little hand drop, mic drop, hand signal. Yeah, because everything comes back to our relationship with ourselves. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So for me, my archetype, and we can go through them, but my archetype is a nurturer. And the nurturer is the inner sponsor, the person that wants to care for people and support people. And even just this past weekend, I was at a plant medicine ceremony weekend. And I started seeing how, like, as the nurturer, we want to give and give and give. But then we can be resentful because we feel like we're not getting stuff back in return. And I was seeing my pattern of like being a martyr. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this does show up in so many areas of my life. And it like allowed me, once I could see that pattern, then let it go, right? And I had so much more of an enjoyable weekend, right? Because I just let go of, how I thought things, quote unquote, should be. And so it was, again, it's not just money, right? It's like our relationship with ourselves. And what I'm finding, and every time I work with somebody, helping them to understand their archetype, they're like, oh my gosh, I see how this impacts my relationships with my partners, with my kids, at work. Money is just one area that it shows up, but it's helpful to look at within money, then to open it up to other areas.
I love that, because I know some people say, and we've talked about this on the show a little bit in the past, like some people say the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. I don't know that I quite agree with that all the way, but the way we do one thing is definitely the way we do most things. And it is such a transferable thing. Like when you find out that you have a martyr complex, in one particular area, of course you're trying to take care of everybody else and every other. And as soon as you talked about nurturer, I was like, oh my God, that's the story of my life. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm sorry, go on.
I'm going to say this about the how you do one things, how you do everything, because I'm totally with you on that. My experience has been in the personal development world. People use that to blame and shame people and make, right? Like, oh, well, where else is this showing up in your life? Instead of the question of like, oh, is that a pattern that you see somewhere else? Like, it's the way that it's asked with love and intention. Because I'm very much like, I don't flush the toilet every time I go to the bathroom at home. But I flush when I'm out, I do. So there's always like these nuances to everything. And they do show up. We just have to be careful on how we ask those questions.
Well, and I think that's beautifully stated, Heather. And I would also say that a lot of times in the coaching industry, that blame and shame energy is how people sell, right? Like people are still selling in the old paradigm. And I feel like this conversation in talking about the different sacred archetypes for money is going to also help us not do that in sales. Like once you shift this relationship with your money, you're not going to feel like, oh my God, I have to get it in any way possible. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so understanding the archetypes, is really just like understanding like a model or theme. And it's that everybody understands archetypes. Like we can think about a king or a lover, or musician or magician or musician, both, right? And that people, no matter what language they speak, understand that there's certain characteristics with each archetype, right? And they're just universal archetypes, right? And none of them, it's not that anything is bad or wrong, right? Or good or bad, right? They're just characteristics that people carry around when it comes to their money archetypes. And right, it's also a pattern of power within you that contains your stories, your beliefs, your motivations, your fear, your courage, right? And it gives you a direction in life that helps you to be aligned with yourself. And all of our suffering comes with not being aligned with who we are. Right? When we're trying to be somebody else, like you said, like you just mentioned, like when somebody's trying to like sell, right? And they're trying to push, and that's not who they are, right? It just doesn't feel aligned. Right? And they feel like, well, my coach told me I had to do it this way. No, there's no one way that you have to do it. Right? You can, and understanding the archetype is understanding the best way of how you want to interact with people, and whether it's selling or buying or any of those things, it's understanding the strengths that you're in, and then your challenges, and then stepping into the strengths and stepping out of the shadow part.
I love that. I think that it's so powerful. And what came up for me while you were talking about the archetypes and how, it doesn't box you in. It just gives you a little bit more of a roadmap as like, oh, this is how I'm showing up in this area of my life and maybe multiple areas of my life. And then what came up for me too was like, well, and what if I plugged into a different one? Like, how would that feel? Right? Like, what if I stopped being the martyr or the nurturer with all of this and just letting all the money go out the door? And what if I stepped into, I don't know, like you tell me, like, what are the other archetypes? Let's get into that.
Yeah, let's get in that. Yeah. So So, well, first I'm going to say like understanding your number one archetype, right, is the driving force of your relationship with money, right? So it is helpful to understand that, to know like your strengths and challenges, and like the more that you stretch to fulfill the destiny, because each of these have destinies, right? Then the more authentic and empowered you are, and it's so helpful to know the other ones, because just like with a personality type, it's like, wait, what's needed right now in this situation? Because a lot of times people will think, well, everybody's got to adapt to me when they're working with people, okay? Instead of, oh, this person's this archetype, let me learn to speak their language and step into that. If we're consistently trying to be another archetype, it can be exhausting. Okay? But having that skill to flow in, and that's the feminine, right? Is to flow, right? And to just to move into different things, like, and to be what's needed at that moment is such an amazing skill. And knowing like, you know, where your like inner home is will always, like, you know, you'll always get led back to that. So there's 7 different archetypes. There's the accumulator, and the accumulator is the inner banker, right? They're the ones, they have a close-knit relationship with money, right? And it looks like their relationship with money is a match made in heaven. It's like they typically live well underneath their means. They're highly attentive to money. They love to save just for the sake of saving. They're naturally highly frugal. And they are all about illuminating respect and appreciation when it comes to money. Right? Their sacred money contract is that they respect the power of money by investing to create freedom. And their strengths are they're conscientious, they're trustworthy, they're disciplined. Their gifts are that they save easily, they create financial independence, they're very financially responsible. And I tell you a fun story that I have a client who is an accumulator, and she was really struggling in her relationship with money. And she was saying, when we went over this, she's like, no, like she was looking at all the strengths, and she's like, I don't think I'm that. And I was like, well, do you think the conflict is that as an accumulator, you want to have a certain amount saved, and because you don't, you're experiencing stress in your life? And she was like, oh, I get it now. I totally get it, right? So that's where, like, when we're not living in it, like we'd be like, no, that's not me, but it really is, and that's where the conflict is for us, like in them, right? And so then we have the alchemist, and the alchemist is the inner idealist, right? They're attracted to unconventional and alternative ways of making money. You know, those things I know me all growing up is all these, like, you know, get rich quick things. You know, the alchemist is like, ooh, that's
Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And the alchemist also, they're great at they're finding it easy to empower others to believe in themselves. Right? They're talented at attracting money in unusual ways. They often care more about social justice and leading a movement more than they do about making money. The alchemist is all about positive change. Right? They want to transform ideas into financial success. And their strengths are that they're idealistic, they're transforming, and they're daring. They're great at creating ideas, championing others, and seeing possibilities. Right? So then we have the celebrity, and the celebrity is the inner big shot. Right? They value money as a tool to achieve status and image and recognition that they want. Right? They don't have problems spending money to enhance their image, including, you know, designer brands, hip clothing, right? They love the bling, right? They love to stand out in the crowd and impress people. They often have very charismatic or magnetic personalities, and they love being recognized anytime they're being generous. And their business often includes a lot of visibility, like celebrity, or making a really big impression. Right? So they're all about illuminating impact and recognition. Right? Their sacred money contract, is to accumulate wealth while being admired and valued in the world. Okay? So gifts-wise, they're magnetic and confident and radiant. They have great leadership abilities and helping others make a great impression and standing out in a crowd. Okay? So that's the celebrity. And then we have the connector, and the connector is the inner relationship creator. They're all about, you know, connecting people and connecting with people that they can, you know, build stuff with, right? And they're looking for long-term relationships and creating relationships that can generate income. Right? The Connector is happy when somebody else makes financial decisions for them. Like they typically don't want to do that. Right? They wish that they didn't have to think about making money or managing money. Right? They're likely to be motivated by taking care of, by being taken care of, than financially driven to have financial independence. Right? The connector will typically avoid facing their money situation and just hope it'll get better. I don't have to look at it, it'll get better. Right? And they care more about heart-to-heart connections than they do about making money. Okay? And they just believe that somehow they're always going to be taken care of. Okay? So they're all about illuminating faith and optimism, and they empower financial independence through the value of their relationships. They're trusting, they're innocent, they're resilient, they don't overly stress about money. And again, with the connector, they're all about creating valuable relationships. Okay? So then we have Maverick. And the Maverick is the inner rebel. Okay? They're willing to take financial risks for a potential big win. Right? They're happy to stand out in the crowd. They have the courage and tenacity when it comes to generating income. Where the connector doesn't want to take risks, the Maverick wants to take risks, right? The Maverick doesn't cave typically to the opinions of others, and they're always looking at how to gain a financial advantage. They're ones that will pay attention to the ups and the downs of their numbers, and they're often drawn to becoming the hero for the underdog and being able to model what's possible. And the Maverick is all about illuminating risk is essential. Where some other types I don't want to risk it, like the Accumulator, no risk. Right? The Maverick is well, of course we would, right? So the Maverick their sacred money contract is to balance extreme risk with financial security. They're clever and flamboyant. They're great at structuring deals and handling financial complexity. Okay? So then we have the nurturer. As I mentioned, the nurturer is the inner sponsor. Okay? They appreciate money, yet they feel the need to overgive for every penny that they bring in. Right? Their natural generosity includes wanting to protect people, shelter, or just give to others financially. And they tend to be responsible with their own personal finances, but they often attract people who need their help, whether it's financially or otherwise. And their self-worth comes from compassion, from giving, and being there for others. Okay? So they're all about caring and illuminating caring and compassion. And their sacred money contract is to care for others by empowering oneself. Okay? So as strengths-wise, they're giving and devoted and reliable, they're generous and very, very loyal. So then we have the romantic, and the romantic is the inner hedonist. Okay? They buy things to feel gratification or sensory pleasure just because they feel like it. Where the celebrity will buy them because they want it for the recognition that they get. The romantic is they just want to feel good. Okay? And the buying things feels good to them. Okay? They indulge in themselves to feel special, appreciated. They'll spend things just because I deserve it. Why wouldn't I? Okay? Where the accumulator may be I don't know, this might not be the wisest thing. Right? The romantic is this feels good. Right? The romantic tends to spoil the people they care about with lavish or abundant gifts, and they might tend to shrug off their money bets, telling themselves they're not good with money. So, and just live in the present moment because they're all about illuminating, enjoying the pleasures of life. Okay? So their sacred money contract is to create financial security while living life to its fullest. Okay? So their strengths are they're luxuriant, they're abundant, they're pleasure-seeking. They believe that there's always going to be more. And they are all about being generous with others and enjoy the things that money can buy. So then lastly, we have the ruler. And the ruler is the inner empire builder. So they're all about being up to big things in the world and making a big impact. Right? Typically for the ruler, their money is often the measurement of achievement and success for them. And they can be conservative when it comes to spending money, but there's a part of them that, while not necessarily motivated to be as showy as a celebrity, will spend things so that they will to show their status. Right? So it's a different come from. Right? The ruler never feels satisfied that they've made enough. They're continually like challenging themselves to achieve higher financial goals. And oftentimes that target is a moving target. And I hear this, my clients who are rulers, every time they hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, yes. Because they get somewhere and they're like, nope, okay. Then when I get to here, then I can feel good. Nope, I got here, and then I can feel good, right? So for the rulers, business dominate most of their time and attention. They fear losing control of their money and power and identity. And they're natural, passionate leaders that people want to follow. They believe that what they're creating in the now will bring them happiness in the future, which drives them to overwork. Okay? Rulers also love empowering people and enriching their lives through their business. Okay? So the ruler is all about illuminating the desire to achieve. And their sacred money contract is to innovate, achieve, and empower wealth with grace and ease. So strengths-wise, they're courageous, they're visionary, they're determined, they have this inner fire or drive that makes them unstoppable, right? They're great at creating an empire where everybody thrives and innovating new and exciting growth opportunities. So those are the sacred money types. So
I just want to pause for a moment because Mervette, who was actually on our show last week, hi Mervette, said, OMG, I'm the connector 100%. And I was like, as soon as you were reading the connector, I'm like, oh my God, I'm multiple of these. Like, I'm so the connector, I'm so the nurturer. And then I've made decisions from other places as well, from other archetypes as well. So tell me a little bit more about how people figure out, you know, how they are. And
yeah, so I have, and I know you have the link for an assessment that they can take, quiz, assessment, whatever word you want to use, right? You go on there and you can do that. And then that'll give you information of what each one is. And some people, like you kind of alluded to, you're like, this and this. There are some people who come up with ties. Right. And they're like, oh, my numbers are like tied to, I have 3 that are all tied. Right. And so if that comes up, what you want to do is just ask, you know, with everybody's desire, you know, to make money, to have if we're talking in business, have a financially successful business, is which one of these archetypes, right, do I need to step into right now to create that? You know, to create the financial freedom that I desire. And that's where that flow is, right? Of jumping in and out of them to see which ones you are. Because like you said, like you may be in a situation where, you know, the nurturer, those of us who are nurturers, like we just want to give. And there may come a time where we're like, this isn't serving my business. Like I need to jump into, you know, this other one. And it could be like, you're like, you know, you need to jump into an accumulator, right? Who is more like, let's look at the numbers, you know, where nurture is like, I don't want to look at them. But to say, I'm going to put this on right now. And then I can go back to my nurture. And because I know that as a nurturer, the more empowered I am, the more I can empower others. And so I may need to sit with my numbers that are uncomfortable, right? To empower myself so then I can be the nurturer that I want to be. So taking the quiz is the best, or the assessment is the best way to figure out, you know, which ones you are.
I love that. It's so powerful. And I just want to backtrack a little bit too, because I, you know, just thinking back on your bio and how, you know, it seems you've done so many different things in your life. I mean, and I understand I've done many different things as well. And I love how now you're doing energy healing. So talk to me a little bit about how the energy healing works into figuring out your sacred money archetype and shifting that, etc.
Yeah. So the energy work piece of it comes from when I'm working with someone and they're living in the shadow side, right, of their sacred money archetype. The energy work piece comes in to help them to release what's causing them to not feel safe, right, to step into being in alignment with their archetype. And so, you know, for women, especially, the number one thing for women is it safe? And this is all humans, right? But for women, when it comes to money, is, you know, is it safe for me to be abundant? Is it safe for me to have money? And the energy work piece comes in as we uncover and start dealing like with different exercises that I have with my clients. I take them through to work through with their sacred money archetypes. Things will come up and they'll be like, oh, like I have a session where I do with my clients on looking at their family history with money. And I have them step into their mom's money story, their dad's money story, or, whomever raised them. And things start coming up and they're like, okay, that's not my story. Like, that's my mom's story. And so we use the energy work piece to identify the emotions that are trapped in the body and to clear them out so we can get that energetic charge out of it to allow them to have the space to step into like I look at the archetypes as like understanding your superpower, and stepping into that strength. And when we release those trapped emotions and trauma, it gives them then space to be able to do that and to be the whichever archetype they are in their fullest and greatest alignment power.
I love that, because what I hear from that is not only like the energy work, which I think is like a lot of emotional work, but it's also embodiment, right? Like, how am I now that, like, I think that so often, maybe I'll just speak for myself. In my understanding in the past, it was like, we do energy work and then it's just done, right? But there wasn't this connection between, okay, well, you did energy work and you released it. But if you're not then like allowing that new thought pattern, that new belief, that new download, whatever it is, to really be in your body, then it's not going to stick.
Yes.
And like, so give me a little bit of embodiment work is like so on the forefront of my brain lately. So give me a little bit of an example of how you would help somebody like really integrate that into their body, like the new belief system, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, it depends on the person and what works best for them. And I'm with you. And this is why I combine energy work and coaching, because I'm like, okay, if you don't have the conscious level skills to support the energy work that we just did, what good is it going to do? And so, in the world of personal development, a big thing is like incantations or mantras or those kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we are doing energy work and say, I'll just use like a simple one of, it's safe for me to have abundance, right? And I do energy work and clear it, right? Then I'm going to have my clients, whether they journal, if they like to journal, or some of them don't, right? And they do more of like an auditory process, right? To record themselves and listen to themselves saying it every day. And I personally, one of the big things for me when I'm working with people in changing their words, right, is that a lot of times like, well, no, it's still like we can have done the energy work and it's still like they're still getting in alignment with that. And instead of just saying, I am safe, and that, their subconscious is like, not yet, not yet. I give them words, what I call conscious blabbing, which is blab is the acronym is B is I'm beginning, like I'm beginning to feel safe. Okay? Or the L is learning. I'm learning to allow myself to feel safe. And the A is allowing, like I'm allowing myself to feel safe. And the last B is becoming. I'm becoming someone who feels safe, to receive money or abundance. And those little tiny shifts make a big difference in embodying it, because then the body feels safe instead of just saying something, that they're like, nope, not there yet. Right? So that's one part of it. And it depends on, each individual client. For some people, like, it may be, afterwards going and dancing, just dancing it out, like after we did the energy work. For some people it's, they may be meditating. So it's really just dependent upon what person, like what works best for that person. Because there's not.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I think it is so important. Like, it needs to work for that person. And I'm always like, take what you need and leave the rest, right? Like, and sometimes people will hear something and be like, oh, well, maybe I should start speaking affirmations, but they're not quite ready to do that. Mm-hmm. And I love how you said, like, I am open to, or I am safe to receive abundance, or the affirmation that you were saying. Yeah. And that might not be true for some people. I always say, then say I am open to feeling safe to receive abundance, right? Like, I'm open to means I'm willing to start stepping into this and journaling on that and doing that, because when we write things out, we're creating it once. When we speak it, we're creating it twice, like how
Mhm.
many times can you create it and really work with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I do the conscious blabbing, because so much, I remember so many times being in that world of personal development, and they're like, just say what who you want to be. And I'm like, I'm saying it, but internally I'm like, nope, BS. And so we need those words to bridge it, like, to create that bridge, to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm beginning to, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't feel like I'm lying and out of alignment with myself. And that's, I think, where they talk about the embodiment piece, right? Is figuring out for each individual what will allow them to feel aligned with it in a way that feels good, and not like they're lying to themselves, because it's going to be so much harder to embody it if everything in your body is screaming no.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, Heather, because I just remember myself when I was like at the beginning of my journey and just like saying the affirmations. And it's like you're doing it from a forceful space, right? Instead of from an empowered space. And the force comes from fear of like, it's not true yet. And so, whereas the powerful piece comes from like love, and it's like, yeah, it really settles in my body. And so I think so much of I think for myself, at least, I will speak for me and my clients, like it's so much of like getting to know the feelings in our body and forming a relationship with our body so that we can be like, oh, that feels off when I say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a no. Like, what is a no in my body? That's a no. And this can, I just to give people a hint, or maybe you have like a little practice for people to like figure out what a yes or a no is in their body.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the first things when I am teaching people about that is I talk about the sway test. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Yeah. So for anybody who's listening, and I was just teaching a couple of guys this past weekend, is you just stand up straight and have your hands drop down to your ground, to the floor, not to the floor, you know what I mean? Like just have your hands down at your side, and to close your eyes and to think of the word yes, and think of everything that you love, everything that you think is beautiful and good, and that you just absolutely adore. And just notice how your body feels, right, when you think those things. And then won't stay here for long, but then to think of the word no, and think of anger and hatred and war and all of the things that you despise. And again, just noticing how you feel in your body, noticing what your body does. How does it move? Does it move? Like what is coming up in your body? Right? And then after you notice that, go back to yes, and all the things that you love and all the things that you think are beautiful. And just notice what your body does when you think yes, and think of all of the things that you love. And it's really that simple. And most people have a similar thing, that most people will say, oh, when I said yes, like I felt open and expansive, and like my shoulders moved back, but I moved forward at the same time, like it was pulling me to it. And when I said no, it was like this shrink back,
Yes.
to protect myself. Right. And that's one of the easiest ways, just to notice, right, what's going on in your body, which will give us information. And if you're like, oh, well, my yes was a contracted and my no was open, right? There may be some things like some trauma and some healing that needs to be done first, right? Because we've been conditioned, right, to want to protect even when something is good. And that there's nothing wrong with that at all. It just gives us an idea that there's some things that we want to clear out, so that, yes does feel safe for you, because for so many people, like a yes, and experiencing joy and bliss isn't safe.
Right.
Okay? And that's, a whole level of healing that needs to be done, just to get us to a place where like, okay, it can feel safe. It's okay, or like you said, I'm open to feeling safe. That's typically what I do with people to get them to start checking in. And there's some other things like just going down and scanning your body when you feel a certain emotion and noticing where you feel it in your body. They're all, again, like for me, it's just depending on who I'm working with and how I know that they work. Because some people are more visual, some people are more auditory, some people are more kinesthetic.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And I totally resonate with that. Like when before I was even really connected in my body, I remember somebody suggesting something to me and I was like, "Oh," and I just came forward and I lurched forward, my whole body contracted and I was like, "My body says no." Like that's a no. And it's and so I was at the beginning of like reformulating my relationship with my body so that I could really lean into that. But I remember, and then the option that was other than that had come from me was like, yes, that lights me up, that expands me, that's like fun, that feels
Mhm.
free, that feels, really good. And that is exactly where I'm gonna go, even though it's scary as hell. And that, like that's not my normal. And I think that's so important. And I think that that's really helpful in this work too, like healing the relationship with money, figuring out the archetype, and maybe it's like body testing with some of
Mhm.
the archetypes, right? Like which one is right for me? Which one am I identifying with most?
Mhm.
Or doing the quiz because that is, mental and some people resonate with that better, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think most people when they hear them, they're like, "Oh, I totally know what I am." You know? And I have a couple of really good friends who have like multiple six-figure, coaching practices, and they're all ruler archetypes. And I like it's so funny because I look at them and I'm like, ah, this makes so much sense, right? Because I know I do so much more, but I don't charge as much as they do. Where they
Mhm.
just coach and I do coaching and energy work, and I'm like, oh, there's my nurture coming up. I need to step more into a ruler, right? Um, and not that I need to, but I'm like if I wanted to do the level that they're doing, could I step into the ruler? Would that serve me? Yeah, and I can't dishonor the nurture in me, right? Too, because that would just feel then that would go into that like icky selling place, and
Yeah.
that's not at all where I'd want to be.
Well, it's not aligned with you.
Right.
And so I love the awareness around all of that and helping people figure that out. And I'm just a little bit curious. What comes up for me is like, so how has this information like shifted you and your business and like how is it now compared to where it was when you found this information?
Mm. Oh man. Oh, there's a bunch of things. I feel so much more confident, right? And even just knowing, like I said, for me, the nurture, like that always felt like I was weak, and now
Mhm.
like seeing the power in it and understanding that the sacred money contract, right, is to empower others, by empowering myself. Like I can empower so many more people when I'm empowered myself. I'm not empowered when I'm being the martyr. Like that doesn't serve anybody, right? So it's allowed me to step more into my power and confidence and what I have to offer people. It's also given me so many more tools to be able to help people understand how they're designed and to function within that design, and to get into those deeper places with people. Of like I mentioned, so many clients are like, "Oh, this isn't about money." Like this is all about my relationship with myself, right? So it's given me more tools to help them to be able to connect back with themselves. And ultimately, that's what we want, right? Is for people to be connected back with themselves, whether we go through the avenue of money or, something else, right? Like that's ultimately what we want. So I feel like I have so many more tools to be able to help somebody to get connected back to themselves, and it shows up for them in being more empowered with their money. For me personally, I, used to shrink when thinking about dealing with my money, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have more money put aside than I've ever had. Like I have no problems looking at, like I use Mint for my tracking, like go in there every week and track everything, and like have no problems like moving around my money when I need to, and feel so much more confident. Like, to be able to go talk to somebody about money. Whereas before I'm just like, no, I just want to cry. Like talking about money now doesn't make me want to cry, which is, I mean, that in and of itself is the biggest thing for me personally.
That sounds like an amazing shift. I mean, how empowered is that? And that allows you to empower the people that you're helping even further because you're able to stand in that aligned and in integrity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's everything. Like I, created a course called Align with Abundance. And it's so fun when I hear, the women, they're like, I thought that this was just going to be about money. They're like, but so many other things are like becoming so much more abundant in my life. And that, like, for me, alignment is such a big thing. And it seemed to go hand in hand. Like, let's align with abundance. And, Celeste, I'm going to say this, and I know some people this could be controversial, but not everybody's meant to be a millionaire, like on this time on earth. Right.
And not everybody wants to be.
Right. And so that's where understanding your sacred money archetype, like, it gives you the ability to, like, just exhale, right? And be okay with, like, hey, you know what? I'm not, like, I feel like I should be a ruler, right? But I'm not, and that's okay. And that's even understanding, like, within business, do I want to have a business, like, I'll just use the coaching, but, like, do I want to have a Tony Robbins type business where everybody knows your name? Or am I, like, the type that wants to have a business where I impact so many people, and, like, people don't really, like, my name's not big as his, but I'm having a great impact on a big amount of people, because it's more like, as the connector, it's all about connecting with people than the celebrity who wants to be seen. And none of them are bad or good or right or wrong, as I mentioned, right? But it's just understanding, wait a minute, like, I really don't need to be in the limelight. I'm really happy, just connecting with people one-on-one and growing in that way. And that's where I love helping people understand that, because it just gives them the freedom then to just align with themselves. And at the end of the day, like, when we think about abundance, like, we are abundant. Like, at the core, that's what we are, is abundant.
We're so abundant. And I think that this is the perfect, like, conversation too, to highlight. I don't know if you saw Mervette's question. So she asks, so does that mean that we need to try and pull from all of the archetypes, or do we just need to pull from a few others to fortify where our specific weakness is in our own archetype? And weakness is in parentheses, in quotations, because we know that it's not really weakness. It's just perceived weakness.
Right. Yeah. So ultimately what we want to do is to heal the shadow sides of our top archetype. Right. And as we do that, like, that strengthens our strengths in that archetype. And we typically will be leading from our top three. Right? Like, if we're trying to be, like, one of our bottom ones, like, sometimes that can just cause us too much trouble. Like, if we're trying to be what we're not, instead of saying, wait, this is where I am and let me live in this power, instead of trying to be from others, like, it can get messy. So if we say, wait a minute, these are my top three, let me step into the strengths of these, that makes life so much easier.
Can I just say, like, I'm having a mind blown, like, huge aha moment in my own life right now. Like, trying to be other people or other archetypes around money and success and business and all of that has been so uncomfortable for me in the past. And I feel like you just gave permission to myself and everyone who hears this to be like, whatever your type is, A, it's perfectly okay. It's just how you are. B, heal the shadow side of what's going on there and just really focus on the strengths of your top three, and you're going to be amazing. And I'm sorry, that was just, like, really, really huge for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is exactly it. Like, that's exactly it. There was this old story that I heard that was a saying from a Southern preacher, where he said, "Be who you is, because if you ain't who you is who you ain't." Right?
Yeah, interesting. That's true.
Yeah, and when you is who you ain't, right? It's like nothing works. Nothing works.
Right.
When I think about my friends who are the ruler archetypes, which is one of my lowest, right? And I'm like, okay, I just got to do that. And I'm like, it doesn't work for me at all. And then I just struggle, and it just feels so heavy, right? But when I step into, like, being the nurturer, it may take longer, right? But it just feels so much easier for me, because that's just how I'm wired, right? And it's like not making it wrong anymore. Just accepting, wow, these are my gifts. Let me step into the gifts instead of fighting all of the challenges that I have.
Yes. Oh my God. And this also brings up like this huge conversation I had late last week with a colleague who was talking about, and it felt like such an activation to me, but we were talking about, and I often talk about this, but she said it in a different way, how women are still so relatively new to the workforce, still relatively new to the work environment. And so we often don't have a really good relationship with money because we haven't had to, like,
Mhm.
historically, generationally. Like, I know in my family the women didn't do a lot with money. Like, my grandmother was on an allowance, so she got to spend it the way she wanted to. She had her own checkbook, and my grandfather just paid her for being a stay-at-home wife, right? Like, that was, their agreement. And so she knew how to manage that stuff, and she was actually pretty savvy with money. But on the other side of the family, it wasn't that way at all. My mom has never been good with money. God bless her. I love her so much. And and so, like, we're still so relatively new, but this woman was saying how we're also, like, you, myself, Mervet, who's, watching this, and the other women who are going to be attracted to this work, we're trailblazers right now,
Mhm.
doing the work that our heart is leading us to. We're forging a path that has not been done before, right? And I think that that's really important to give ourselves grace and compassion when we're realizing, like, oh, my nurturer is a little bit out of control. And
Mhm.
so that's okay because I don't have ancestral um, examples to
Right.
really look onto this. So I really felt compelled to say that because I think so many women were like, well, why haven't I gotten this yet? I'm 40 something years old or more or less or whatever. And it's like, because generationally, you didn't have to get it. And now you're getting it. Like, now we're stepping into this.
Mhm. Yeah. And that is huge. I just finished binge watching Bridgerton. I don't know if
So
you
good. Oh my God.
watch. It's so good. But then that, and I recently watched Queen's Gambit and a couple others, and I just paid attention in those about, because there's so much of it about women and their relationship with money. Bridgerton, not over at all, but if you look at it underneath, right, it is all about
Right.
their role, and that they weren't the breadwinners, they weren't ones that were bringing in money. And like Queen's Gambit is set in the like late 50s, early 60s ish, and it's like all about women making money, like, and if you didn't have somebody keeping you, right, then like, what do? You're worthless. And same thing with Bridgerton. It's like, I need a man to keep me. I need to get married, so that how am I going to be taken care of? And we're in this like shift of, we stepped into this, oh, women can do everything. And I very much think that there's a purpose for the masculine, there's a purpose for the feminine. I like there we like to try to get rid of both of them and make it neutral is dangerous, in my opinion. Right. And at the same time, like, there's things that women have not been allowed to do, like deal with money, that have really hindered us. And so then myself, like this wounded aspect that I had of like, I don't even know what to do with money, I don't know how to care for it, like it shows up for so many of us. And that's like, we're just, as you said, at the cusp of healing that, and shifting and changing that. And it's massive work that we need to do, you know.
And we can only do our own work.
Yes.
We can only do our own work. And then if we feel led to help other people with that, that's amazing. But we can only wherever help ourselves first.
Mhm.
We have to put our safety mask on before we can put on others.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
I love that. Oh my God, Heather, I feel like you and I could talk all day about this. This has been such a profound conversation and so powerful. I'm so appreciative of you for coming on the show and being with us today. And I know that you have, well, the quiz, which we've talked about a couple times, and I did link in the chat.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm also going to be giving a link to my website, which people will be able to find out more about you. But tell us a little bit more about the benefits of figuring out why people want to take the quiz, of figuring out their seven, their main money archetypes.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest benefits is to stop the struggle in your relationship with money, right? To have a loving, connected relationship with money. Because think about it, every single thing that you do is impacted by money. Do I get my car fixed or not? Right? Should I buy this thing or not? Should I go to this grocery store or this other one? Like every single, like money has its tentacles in every, and not in a bad way, I don't mean that in a bad way, but like every single thing that we do impacts, like, is impacted and guided by our relationship with money. And so if we're in stress all the time, if we're in frustration, if we're in lack, right, it's because we're not understanding that relationship with money. And from my perspective of being in the coaching world and all the stuff, like understanding these archetypes, right, is again, it's just understanding like the box that you were designed to be. And it's not putting somebody in the box, it's just going back to, like I said, like understanding, like I have curly hair. I fought my curly hair like for almost all of my life. And once I finally embraced, like, oh, I have curly hair, then I was able to find products to support that. Then I was able to, like, now I look back at pictures with the straight hair and I'm like, oh gosh, like that doesn't look like me, right? And so embracing the curly hair is like, okay, this is more of me, and I don't have to be in stress mode because it's raining and oh my gosh, I got to straighten my hair, And it's the same thing with understanding our archetypes. Is when we can understand who we are and how we were designed, we can stop trying to be somebody else. And that just like allows us to settle into who we were created to be and live in that, which then starts opening up so many more doors for us instead of I'm trying to be somebody else all the time. So that I feel like is just, getting in alignment with who you truly are is really one of the biggest ways that understanding your archetype and living in that, like, it will just impact every area of your life.
I love that. I think it's so profound. So I'm going to, put it at the bottom of the screen for those who are watching. Otherwise, if you want to go take the assessment, you can go to divinefeminineLeaders.com/Heather Esposito, which is ESPOSITO. Again, that's ESPOSITO. And I encourage you, if you have any, questions or curiosities, to be able to go to Heather's quiz, because I think that this is so important. We can't change anything without awareness.
Yes.
We just cannot move forward unless we know how we work best. And I think that is really the core of this message, is like when you figure out who you are with money, then you can be empowered around it. Mm-hmm. And so, Heather, I am so grateful for you. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll chat soon for sure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Yes, absolutely. All right. And we will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you so much. And here's the outro. This has been the Divine Feminine Leaders Podcast with Celeste Hartwell. Thank you so much for joining us today. There are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and you have chosen to spend your time with us. That is not lost on us, and we are deeply appreciative. If you want to find us online, find all the links and the free giveaways that were mentioned in the show, please join us at CelesteHartwell.com. That is CelesteHartwell. And you can link to this episode as well as any other episode there. If you enjoyed this episode and the content that we shared, I invite you to subscribe so that you get notifications every time a new episode is released. Or share it with a friend. If you know another female entrepreneur who could benefit from this information, we would love for you to share the love. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.